Okay, all right, so let's get it started. First, I would like to compliment the GFCC and in particular Chad, Deborah, Roberto and his team. They are doing a wonderful job, not only here in Athens, but all the year through. And it's amazing the amount of activity you produce, and also the knowledge and the publications that you are able to produce over this period of activity of the GFCC. So it's a pleasure to be part of this, and again, our compliments to that. I would start by addressing the topic that we are faced with in this panel, and then I will introduce the members of the panel. We will be discussing about a topic that has been pervasive over this meeting, and it's pervasive indeed in the press and the agenda of politicians, universities, and so forth. We are facing a serious energy crisis, and this serious energy crisis has as a consequence, as negative consequence, a very strong impact on the economies. Recession is looming, a very strong impact on social well-being and living standards, and also a very serious and negative impact on political stability and social stability. This crisis, we feel it every day. We see unprecedented high inflation rates, as the world has not experienced for more than 30 years, most of the world, characterized by rising interest rates, by a very serious shortage of raw materials, not only in energy, but also in supply of even manufactured products. See what's happening to the automobile industry. And also, of course, sky-high energy prices. Just to give you an idea, since the start of this rally, prices of oil have peaked at 60% higher than they were before the crisis. And the price of natural gas has gone up a staggering 400%. And I would like to remind you that the price of gas normally was pegged to the price of oil. And the future markets priced, and the future contracts priced gas, natural gas, as the prediction for the evolution of prices of oil. So we have a decoupling here where natural gas has reached 400%. It's gone down a little bit recently for reasons that can be explained, but still this is completely unexpected and absolutely staggering. So having said that, we are facing with a problem. And this problem is that this crisis has created a turmoil that we may try to understand what is the cause. And I must say that the first cause was coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. The economies of the world rebounded, and there was an excess of demand over supply in terms of energy sources, and the prices of oil started increasing. And then all of a sudden, almost 9 months ago, on the 24th of February, we had this invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and the world entered turmoil. What we can see so far is sanctions in the first period of these 9 months. And at a certain point, despite the sanctions, Europe was paying $1 billion to Russia, $1 billion to Russia per day, even with the sanctions. And then Russia, despite receiving this revenue, decided to weaponize energy and turning supply as a weapon against Ukraine and its allies. So first was Poland and Bulgaria because of the not wanting to pay in rubles. Then it was Finland because of threat of NATO. And then in June, Russia decided to halt supply through Nord Stream 1. And then later in the summer, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 were completely disabled. Now, this infrastructure, which was essential to bring gas to Europe, don't forget that Europe was 40% of natural gas dependent from Russia, and Germany was 50% dependent on natural gas from Russia. This creates a big problem. Now, these infrastructures are disabled. By the way, the financial loss of these infrastructures, and Nord Stream 1 not even started operating, amounts in tens of billions of euros as a complete loss. Who's paying for that? The West. Now, this creates a big difficulty. How are we going to stabilize the prices of energy? And how is Europe being able to compensate for this lack of supply? That's the question, and that's the scenario that I would like to discuss with our members of the panel. And I will introduce our panel members by order. First, I would like to introduce you Megan Clifford. Megan is Associate Director of the very famous laboratory, which is Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago. Megan has had has performed many functions, many roles with Argonne. One of them was Chief of Staff. And Megan is a scientist making bridges with the society and the corporate world. Then we have Olin. Olin Weddington is the chairman of Weddington International. Olin has a distinguished career. He was formerly a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a board member of the George Marshall Foundation. And he performed many important roles in office in the Department of Treasury, Department of Commerce, and as economic policy advisor in the Council of the White House. Then I would like to introduce you Athanasios Savakis. Athanasios is chairman and the CEO of NX Group. NX is the Energy Exchange of Greece. He's also an executive director of Biosolids and also a member of the managing committee of the Athens Stock Exchange. Formerly, Athanasios was president of the Greek Federation of Industries. And then comes Chad. Chad doesn't require any introduction, but don't forget that Chad, besides being the chairman of the GFCC, he was until very recently the chairman of Shell, and previously the chairman of Bank of America. And for more than a decade, he served as chairman and CEO of DuPont. All right, so I would start by Chad, by moving from the more general to the more specific in this discussion. What I would like to address is, what is your view regarding the balances that have to be achieved between energy security and energy transition? We were too much concentrated, or perhaps solely concentrated, on energy transition for a decade, especially in Europe. And we forgot something that we took for granted, that was energy supply. Then we have this issue, which should not be surprising because it's a basic issue, but we all caught under guard with this issue, which is the security of energy. Some people prefer the concept of resiliency instead of security. But now we have to balance out the needs for supply with the necessity to save the planet and do this energy transition. Where are these balances? How can they be achieved? Are we bound to reschedule the dates 2030, 2050? Are they within our grasp still? What is your view about these dynamics? Chad?
Thank you. I think you summed it up quite well. I think the global turmoil will continue. It'll take on different forms, but I think we should say that's more of a norm, and so we're going to have to take steps to adjust to that. I think the Environmental Energy Minister earlier today, in his one-word answer at the end, said renewables. I think he's got it right. Renewables with a storage capacity. And so we just need to accelerate renewables. And in an ideal world, we would have a central bank for energy to help manage through this crisis like we have now, because going through this transition will always be a little bit out of line. So we need an orderly process. I'm not going to wait for that to happen, but I think it's what we need.
All this process requires, and the speeding up of this process and the rescheduling of this process requires large sums of investment. And this CapEx, it's not now anymore exclusively or mainly in the renewable sector or low carbon sector, but perhaps we have to rethink investments upstream in carbon. So is that correct, or can we get away with the low level of investments that we have seen for the past 5-6 years upstream in the oil and gas sector?
We're going to have to significantly increase investment. There's no way around it, but the returns are becoming better. Financial segment is becoming organized to invest in that. They're getting a lot of pressure from different forces to invest. And I think we just have to keep the course. We just have to keep moving through.
Mm-hmm. The industry, and you come from Shell, is always predicting and readdressing the calculations for when peak oil is reached. And peak oil is the point in time where the consumption of oil would start diminishing in the world. It has been increasing, is still increasing. In your view and from your experience at Shell, Chad, when do you think now peak oil will be reached?
We're close in this decade. Now, how rapidly it will go down will depend on how fast we bring up the renewables. We're getting pretty close. And obviously, there's going to be oil left in the ground when we're through. We're not going to run out of oil.
Okay, thank you. Now, I turn to Alan. We are, at the moment, drawing COP27 to an end in Cairo. It will end this coming Friday. So COP27 is a major attention drawer on the part of the whole planet. I know that you have been following that. What are the main takeaways and the main achievements that we can envisage so far?
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this important discussion. As you said, we're not yet at the end of the COP27 until the end of this week. One of the primary issues that I think will go down to the wire, if you will, in terms of the outcome, relates to a new funding mechanism and new commitments, primarily from the developed world to the developing world, the global south. I think this crisis of energy security, it started out because of a tragic, horrible, kinetic event, war. But I think it is having implications well beyond the question of supply. You mentioned the weaponization by Russia of energy. And I think, in my view, anyway, it is actually accelerating. You talk about the balance between the transition. Is there going to be a pullback from that, maybe more reliance on fossil fuel in this at least short to a medium term? But I think what we are beginning to see is the Western world, if you will, certainly the industrialized world, the democratic portion of the world, EU, Japan, the United States, coming together in new ways with a very strong commitment to collaboration, to unified response. And I think the result of this process, which we've already seen, is actually going to accelerate, in many respects, the energy transition. I think it is true that there will need to be some reassessment, I think there already is, of the role of fossil fuel in this transition period, certainly in the early phase. I think, for example, natural gas, which can itself, as a substitute for other fossil fuels, play a significant role in the reduction of greenhouse gases, so that it can become, in a strategy where there is diversification of energy sources, a role for gas in this transitional period that may be larger than many had thought pre-invasion. Because renewables, although necessary, although they need to be accelerated, they do not provide the stable base load that for electricity that many countries require. I think one of the positive results of this period post, well, we're still in the period of invasion, is that in the developing world, I think that the focus that the US, EU, Japan, the democratic portions of the advanced economy, that this has spilled over into the conversation, the dialogue of the global South. And to go to your question on COP27, there has been an elevation globally with respect to the question of access to energy sources in the developing world. 750 million, I think, is roughly the estimate of the globe does not have access, at least reliable access to electricity. And the participation and impact of the global South in COP27, I think, is one of the big, if not the biggest story in this current session in Egypt, because it is forced to the surface in a very dramatic and, I think, intense way. In fact, some have referred to this as the African COP. The question of financing, the tremendous amount of investment, of technology transfer, of collaboration, of internal reform within countries. It has forced this mix of issues right to the surface. And as the UN Secretary General, I think, called this recently, he said, the financing mechanism that comes out of this conference is the litmus test of its success. Now, that may be a bit of an overstatement, but I think there's considerable truth to it. And I think as part of the swirl of activity around COP27, not necessarily in Egypt itself, we're already seeing the advanced industrial world go beyond in terms of its commitment to the global south. It has gone beyond what it had been expected to do, and I may comment on this later, particularly in terms of U.S. leadership.
Well, when it comes to the developing world, as you mentioned, the question is how to develop equal partnerships that involve us all, and also how to compensate somehow these countries that are in a catch-22 between their own development and the need to diminish greenhouse gas emissions. How do you see investments as a financial analyst? How do you see the model of financing these types of partnerships? And I would mention Kande, that yesterday, and I'm quoting, he said, Africans don't want to be bystanders in this digging out of raw materials. He said, we want to refine. So how can you, do you envisage any new model to combine all these interests at play and have a more distributed type of network creating value?
I think there may be a few things that are significant that are not now taking place. In terms of financial instruments, the mechanics of how projects get financed, I'm not sure we need to bring into the discussion new mechanisms for financing. I mean, we essentially know how to finance a variety of infrastructure-related projects. What we need is political leadership, and we need it from the West. And I think both the EU, I think Japan, I think the U.S. are seized now with the long-term implications of over-dependency, certainly, on strategic adversaries, and for the need to have reliable sources of energy and power generation. I would reference, and I do this with experience in 3 Republican administrations, my admiration for what has taken place on a bipartisan level in the United States over the last year, with the amount of new funding that has been approved by the Congress in 2 major pieces of legislation under President Biden on a bipartisan basis, the so-called Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and also the Inflation Reduction Act. The latter containing about $370 billion in new money to address climate change-related issues and this energy transition. And it will be spread out in a variety of sectors that have relevance to this question. Also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. That's a $1.2 trillion piece of legislation. I would estimate maybe not quite half of that. My colleagues may have a more precise estimate on that, but will be devoted to the energy transition. So in essence, over the last year, $1 trillion of new money. Forget its inflationary impact. They're offsetting values here at stake. And this has been an important week, I think, for the EU, the US, in the context of COP27. I will illustrate by referencing an announcement that was made just today when President Biden visited. You may have seen it in the news, Indonesia, Bali, for the G20 meeting. And what the Treasury spokesman said is the largest single climate financing ever, a $20 billion package put together by a combination of the US, the EU, Japan, to transition Indonesia away from its excessive reliance on coal to new renewable sources of energy. What is significant about that, the details haven't been worked out. They're going to be worked out and negotiated by the parties over the next 3 to 6 months. Let me add, this was a 10 or 12 country arrangement. And it also involved a large number of the leading financial institutions, the big banks globally, both from the EU, the US, Japan, a few other countries. But it is a model for collaboration that needs to be appreciated. Yeah. And it holds the leadership behind this common effort needs to be understood. It needs to be looked to, I think, in other situations. But that's the kind of thing that is, I think, important to this energy transition.
Thank you.
This kind of international collaboration.
Right. Very interesting. All this money, part of it will come your way, Megan. Institutions like yours, and it will be benefiting science, technology. How do you see the role of technology and science in helping this transition by speeding up transition and by increasing the efficiency of energy use? And Olin mentioned a model of collaboration. So could you give us a hint about what a kind of institutional framework is being designed at the moment? And in terms also of the policy frameworks that are needed to move from concept to reality. Could you give us some hints about this?
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you to GFCC for hosting us today for this really knowledge sharing and knowledge creation opportunity. It is an unprecedented time, really, and the crisis in front of us with climate change calls upon the entire world to address this. And the US has made a significant investment. As Olin mentioned, there's also a third passing of the CHIPS Plus Science Act, which puts another over $50 billion into the system. That's more focused on semiconductors and the supply chain issues around there. But all said, we've got some significant goals in the US that we're striving for. The Department of Energy has announced 6 Earth shots that are really ambitious decadal goals that are focused on various clean energy transitions. I'll also say, I want to go back to the word you brought up, resilience, and what Olin said around diversification. Really, to have resilience in the system requires energy diversification, energy redundancy, because we are interconnected. And those the interdependencies between energy systems are real, and we've faced that. So to your question about partnerships, what are the frameworks? We are seeing this on a regional, national, and global level. We have to partner at scale to achieve impact at scale. Let me give you an example on a regional level. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, there will be $8 billion that is coming through the US for regional hydrogen hubs, clean hydrogen. $8 billion for at least 4. So this has created very large coalitions. Right now I'm working with one that has about 40 partners in the Midwest, and these are public-private consortiums to try to really create a clean hydrogen economy for the region and for US and have broader implications. On a more global scale, one of the frameworks on partnership that has been underway is the Net Zero World Initiative. This has actually been stood up by multiple US government agencies as well as the philanthropic communities. So think of Breakthrough Energies, Bloomberg Foundation, and the national labs are providing the technical guidance and expertise, the technical road mapping to help various countries get to a net zero position. This Net Zero World Initiative has countries such as Egypt, Chile, Argentina, the list goes on. But we feel a responsibility as a national lab complex, Argonne being one of 17 in the DOE system, that we have a role to play in this technology evolution.
Can you give us an expectation, kind of a bet, as to how long it will take to bring green hydrogen to economy, the green hydrogen economy, to a point where it will be cost efficient to produce? Some people say it would take at least 10 years. Yeah. But acceleration, I think that's what we need. And all this money that is being poured into developing all these concepts and technologies may perhaps shorten this period. Do you have an estimate?
Well, I'm not a betting woman, so we do have a goal, and that is, this is a target set by the US, that it's $1 clean, $1 per kilogram of clean hydrogen in a decade.
In a decade?
In a decade.
Okay.
Okay, so and there's many goals that we're pushing towards. And this is all for really a clean economy by 2050. That's ambitious. So I'm not a betting person, but I'm a very optimistic person, and we're going to push to meet that.
Thank you, Megan. Athanasios, now to you. You are from Greece. I come from Portugal. We are at both ends of Europe. We are like the goalposts of Europe. You in the east, I in the west. And we are countries with similar sizes in terms of population. And we are both of us endowed with sun, sea, wind. Tell me, what is the state of the energy supply in Greece, and how far you are in this decarbonization? As you probably know, the west of Europe, in particular the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain, to a certain extent have been, just to a certain extent, protected from this supply from Russia, because our main supply of gas comes from the North Africa. And also we have a strong flow of liquefied natural gas coming from different places, especially from the United States. By the way, in Portugal, in a normal situation, we are having 1/3 of our supply derived from hydro. And I say normal situation because the whole of Europe is facing a start of a drought. But 1/3 of our energy is hydro, and wind and solar reaches 30% of our needs and growing. So more than 60% of our needs come from renewable sources. This is something which we are betting on continuing. Portugal closed its 2 last coal-fired power plants last year. The government has announced they will not reignite these coal power plants. This is happening across Europe, is happening in Spain, unfortunately for the environment. So we are at the moment coal-free, we are fuel-free, and we are also nuclear-free. So we can supply our needs out of renewables and, to a certain extent, gas as everyone else. So this is one side of Europe. So you'll be particularly positioned to supply from Eurasia, which is a major source of energy supplies, carbon-based energy supplies. So
actually, I would say that we share pretty much the same characteristics as far as the energy market is concerned. Greece may be one of the countries that is less affected by this Russian gas crisis. And in any case, we do share, being part of the EU Energy Union, the same common values and dimensions that the Energy Union wants to deliver. In that aspect, we do try to fit into the Repower EU targets, as well as the Fit for 55, which is a very ambitious, if you allow me, program.
Too ambitious.
Too ambitious, maybe. Necessary, though, because in any case, being ambitious, even if you fail, means that you ended up in a better position than before. So it's something that we do share, and it is something that we are in a great, let's say, determination to achieve. I would say it is quite demanding as far as investment is concerned. We know very well that the Repower EU targets require an additional 210 billion of investments by 2027 in order to achieve these targets. Mm-hmm. It's a huge amount of effort and money, of course, but it is covered mainly by the Recovery Fund as well as other financial tools. In that aspect, I do believe that Europe will be, and Greece for that matter, will be in a position to diversify energy supply by increasing LNG imports, which is the main objective, and at the moment is the competitive advantage of Greece, if you wish. And of course, reduce the imports from Russian suppliers, Russian sources. In that aspect, we are also following a very demanding and very ambitious plan in speeding up the production of biogas and green hydrogen, as well as to deploy even faster the renewable sources investments. What is quite interesting is to understand what are the lessons that we can draw from this crisis, and it's interesting that these new lessons, or the lessons to be reminded, are that energy prices are subject, among others, to geopolitical turmoil, and as far as economies are concerned, a good practice for any energy portfolio is to minimize risk through efficient hedging practices. And this is something that we learned very well in Greece in the latter period. In the following years, the rapid expansion of renewable energy sources should also be framed by the development of solid storage capacity as a necessary supplement to balance the fluctuations in renewable energy sources production. A necessary condition is the fastest possible, and this is for all Europe, interconnection of the European states' transmission networks and energy markets, and in other words, focusing on strengthening the energy union with a fully integrated energy market, enabling the free flow of energy throughout the EU through adequate infrastructure and without technical or regulatory barriers. Either you have energy union or not.
Yeah. And Athanasios, you are at the very inception of this new energy exchange in Greece. How could an energy exchange bring a little order to this disorder in the energy market?
This is this is, I think, is the most challenging period to be an energy exchange, or let's say to try to lead an energy exchange, because in principle it does not serve its purpose. What is its purpose? Is other than provide transparency and policies and security of energy supply, it is also, its mission should be to increase competition, to increase, let's say, participants, to attract more members. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is a very, difficult situation and difficult period. And I believe that although the infrastructure, the bases have been set, it is quite early to see what would be the fruits of our, let's say, of our efforts. Okay. Nevertheless, we are very close, and I believe that the market has matured enough, and they realize the usefulness of an energy exchange, not only in Greece, but overall in Europe.
Okay. I think this discussion could not end without us mentioning ESG. And ESG is now something which is completely mainstream in capital markets. You, Athanasios, are a member of the Athens Stock Exchange. So this question I would address to you and to Chad as chairman of a publicly listed company in this recent wave of ESG. We have the E for the environment there. So talking about sustainability and talking about preservation of the planet is talking about behavior of companies and their executives. So the question I would like to ask you has to do with how do you feel the pressure from the market and the capital markets in particular to follow ESG standards, and how risky it is to quickly run into greenwashing territory. What are your views on this? Quickly, because we have 5 minutes left.
Actually, I think it should be a priority. ESG is it's something that we should have adopted yesterday. You cannot discuss energy without environment. You cannot discuss efficiency without compliance to sustainable development goals. I think it's something that has been incorporated not only in the capital markets, but also in the banking system, in performance indicators, especially in Greece. Although we came very late into this field, we have made huge steps. The Athens Stock Exchange was one of the first, let's say, institutions in South Europe that adopted these principles. And in my opinion, it is something that will dictate the competitiveness of businesses, markets, and countries in the near future.
Okay. Chad?
If you go back 15 years, you said if you wanted to focus on environment, social improvement, and governance, it had to be regulation, it had to come from governments. Turned out that was wrong. It turns out that investors, employees, and customers can also have an impact on that. And I think it's a very good thing. It's pretty uneven right now, but I think it's starting us in the right direction. It's getting companies moving in the right direction. It's very positive, and I think almost all companies are paying much more attention to it than they ever did before. I believe some of the things like the Science-Based Target Initiative which gives some checking of the goals you put out to avoid the greenwashing is very important. So I think we need steps like that to make sure it's just not talk, it's really action. And we need more things. TCFD, a voluntary commitment also around your carbon forecast is another good step in the right direction.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you for being concise. Final question, we have 3-4 minutes to Olin and Megan. Do you think that carbon-based activity going forward should pay for the energy transition, should pay for science, technology, and renewables? In other words, should there be an imposition from the states tax-wise, or should it be a self-decision from companies in retaining profits for the transition instead of distributing dividends? What do you think about this? Unfortunately, quick answer, please.
A sentence or two, yes. I think the market should be able to provide the answer. I think in this energy transition, second sentence, that we're probably facing the largest single economic opportunity of our generation. And it can be financed in large part by the private sector with some government supports.
Absolutely. Megan?
Yes, I would agree with that, creating conditions for the market, for that capital influx. I do think that in the US, states have a role to play, and incentives are a way to help really get us to meet those targets in an aggressive way.
All right, thank you so much. So I would like to thank our discussants for this very interesting conversation. I hope that the audience has enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.
Well,